settlement. That news broke
Friday
around
11 something.
like 10:30. We'll talk about that today with Keith Smith. We've been talking about it and covering it quite a bit. It's all over the socials, all over Facebook, here certainly in Central Virginia, with a lot of realtors talking, a lot of mortgage brokers talking. Saw a post from Matt Neese about investment property. I don't know if you saw that one.
I did.
I saw a post from Andy Zeman on it.
Yep.
I got a lot of comments and commentary aggregated for Keith Smith from realtors, what they've been posting on social media to get your feedback on. Viewers and listeners, offer some comments in the feed. If any realtors want to ask a question to Keith anonymously, I'm happy to protect your anonymity and relay it live on air. A lot of questions about associations and their futures. A lot of questions about the MLS and its future. A lot of questions about sellers agents needing to convey the value proposition of buyers agents with their clients.
And there's a topic that nobody's talking about, and it's a little heavy, but it's the 2.5% opt-in.
Yeah.
And the impact on that. So this is long, not even remotely close to being.
We're just at the tip of the iceberg.
Well, I think as far as, and I think I know, as far as how it impacts the general public, I think that's been pretty much settled. The path on that is, and we'll talk about it when we go live, is particularly in the state of Virginia, has been pretty much outlined. But this 2.5% opt-in is an interesting part of that nobody's really talking about. And what that means is if you've done over a certain amount of money in 2022, 2.5% of your last 4 years of revenue has to be paid to the plaintiffs in order to get protection. That's a huge number. Keller Williams was so smart.
To a piece?
Gary saw it coming. He's not a schmuck by any stretch of the imagination. That would have cost the company over $250 million instead of 70. And this, by the way, impacts some local folks too.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Viewers and listeners, let us know if you're watching the program. I'll highlight some that are watching the show. Judah Wickower, we're ready to rock and roll here in T-minus. Actually, let's rock and roll right now, Judah. Good Wednesday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and this is Real Talk with Keith Smith. Thank you kindly for joining us. The show presented by Yes Realty Partners, a show starring Keith Smith, a show that has quite a bit of fodder for the content cycle. This show has become the source for real estate in a market we call Central Virginia, 300,000 people strong. On Friday, National Association of Realtors, a settlement of significant proportions. We're going to unpack this from every single angle, from a seller's angle, from a buyer's angle, from a seller's broker's angle, a buyer's broker's angle, from a Redfin, Zillow,
or EXP,
Compass, EXP angle, the discount broker angle. A lot we're going to cover on today's program, including what it means for the future of the MLS, what it means for the future of associations like the National Association of Realtors, the Virginia Association of Realtors, and the Charlottesville Area Association of Realtors. Judah Wickower is the director and producer. If we can go to the studio camera and welcome the star of today's talk show, Keith Smith.
Do I have a star on? No star on.
You have a pin. What's that? The American flag and the U.S. Marine Corps pin.
Amen. First of all, great to see you. I missed you.
Great to see
you. I missed you. I don't like these long spans between our little conversations.
It was a week.
Yeah, in front of, that's right, it was a week ago today.
Yeah.
In these long spans of having conversations with you and me and a couple of microphones and a few cameras and a bunch of folks.
You got a bunch of your colleagues
I
watching
do.
you here.
Oh,
I knew
great.
you would.
Great, yeah. And so, look,
They're listening.
we don't talk too much about, I don't talk too much about this, but I am actually a man of faith. And I put a lot of prayer and thought over the weekend on how to approach today.
Okay.
You know, instinctively, and my thing would be, I want to start off, well, I told you so, right? But I won't do that. Thank God I won't do that.
I think you just did.
But look, if you in the space and didn't anticipate this coming, you know, you're really watching the tea leaves and all that stuff. So what happened? What really happened? What was the big takeaway from Friday? What was the 3 or 4 big takeaways? So let's start off with that. The first thing is, we've been talking about this forever here, there will be a decoupling. We've talked about not if, but when. Well, we know when the when is. The when is in July. So in July, there's going to be a decoupling. So let's define that real quickly. That means that in the MLS, listing agents will not be able to put in any way, shape, or form buyer agent compensation. That will assuming this all passes the judge and DOJ, and that's a huge question mark, right? This has to get approved yet. But assuming as what the 150-page settlement I read and reread a couple of times over, this happens, there will be a decoupling. So that means nowhere in the MLS. So the first couple of things is the big one was now there's a national requirement
Right.
for a buyer-broker agreement. That doesn't really impact us much here in Virginia. We've been having that for 10 years. That is an actual requirement. You are supposed to have a buyer-broker agreement with the buyer before you put a key in the first door.
Was it being done?
I probably think we would have not have had a lawsuit if that was
Okay.
being done. You know, it's the short answer to that is probably not.
Okay.
So that's number one. Number two is that we cannot include the compensation in the MLS. That's number two. We can negotiate buyer-broker agreements or buyer-broker compensation off MLS. So that means the contract. When we've been talking about this, it's going to be in the contract. And then the last thing that, you know, is really, we kicked off the show a little bit, at least I tried to a little bit, is what does this 0.25% opt-in really mean? And there's about 100 brokerages in the country that are not included in this settlement. And these are big names. You know, there's some local names, but the big ones are Compass,
Yeah.
EXP.
Yeah.
Our friends at Howard Hanna
Oh, yeah.
are excluded from
And explain that. Unpack it very simply for the viewers and listeners.
So what that means, let me double check the number because I want to make sure I get this information out correctly. That if in 2022, if your total sales volume, I'm talking about a brokerage now, exceeded $2 billion,
Okay.
which is not very difficult to get to, by the way, right? That's about 5,000 to 6,000 transactions. You know, something that is more regional, have multiple offices, or national, that's an easy number to hit. Anything, if the brokerage has made over $2 billion in 2022, in order to opt in order to buy into the protection, you have to pay 2.5% of your total volume of sales over the last 4 years. So we're talking millions upon millions upon millions of dollars.
Some cases, hundreds.
That's exactly right. There is an option buried within this settlement that if you happen to be one of these brokerages, you can mediate. So what does that mean? What that means is you just got to take a look at Keller Williams and what they did. They set the model for this. Gary Keller said it. So what'll happen if you're one of these brokerages that trick over this $2 billion, right? And we have local firms that do this, by the way. They're going to have to mediate with the plaintiff's attorneys on some dollar amount. That means they're going to have to open their books, find out how much cash they got, how much liquid assets that they have, and negotiate some sort of dollar amount that they will accept. Then they will get the protection. Now, here's an important thing. Every real estate agent is now protected. But the brokerages that make over $2 billion in 2022 are not. So, this is just the beginning of this. And I've been, probably shouldn't say this publicly, but I've never shied away from this. I think NAR okey-doked a lot of people.
How so?
Can you imagine if you were a local brokerage that had multiple branches in different states that exceeded that amount of money? What are you going to do now, Coach? NAR's not protecting you. You are not protected by...
You're forking out some money.
You're forking out some money.
So what are some of those brokerages?
I just would suggest somebody to do a simple Google search and figure it out. I don't want to kind of cross that line and call out particular names.
Okay.
But that's a real thing. So that's at the brokerage level. So how is this going to impact the average seller and buyer, right?
I got a lot of questions for you. Keep going. You're on point.
So I can try to answer each question directly.
No. Keep going. You're monologuing.
Right. So the reality, I thought that was supposed to be funny. The reality of it is, when this decoupling happens, a couple of things are going to happen in the industry, which I frankly think should have happened a long time ago. There's going to be a very crystal clear transparency. People are going to know who's on first and who's on second. And more importantly, we talked about this back in September, and I think you kind of poo-pooed it a little bit, but there is going to be an absolute requirement for communication. And I'm not just talking, there's communication between you and your buyer, you and your seller, but there's going to have to be communication between the buyer's agent and the seller's agent. And why is that? We're at this decoupling. Jerry's a real estate agent on the other side. He's listing a house. I got a buyer. I got a buyer's agent. I've signed my buyer broker agreement. That's all done. Everybody knows who's on first and who's on second and how this is going to go. The very first thing I'm going to have to do before I show your house is pick up the phone and call Jerry. It's okay, Jerry. 1, tell me about your seller, and 2, by the way, is your seller offering any buyer broker compensation? That's negotiations. It's allowed in the settlement as long as it's not in the MLS, and we're not talking about this publicly. That's that. Now, the answer is either going to be yes or it's going to be no, right? And then I convey back to my client, okay, my buyer broker fee that we've negotiated is now covered by the seller. Let's go. So that's basically...
Page is blowing up.
That's basically how that's going to work from the buyer side. Now, there's a lot of questions about, if the seller's not paying it, who's going to pay it and how it's going to work, and we'll pick that apart a little bit later. I actually think this impacts the seller side more than the buyer side.
Explain why.
Because now the seller is going to have this transparent conversation with his listing agent about what it's going to offer.
Yeah. I mean, this is
and the reality of it is, let's just call it like it is, because this is not coming from my mouth. This is coming from a bunch of CEOs I spoke to over the weekend. If you've got 2 similar homes that are exactly the same, and I've got my buyer broker agreement done, right? And you're the buyer, and you've got a house at $1 that includes the buyer broker fee and one that doesn't, which one are you going to go to?
Of course. Of course.
And this is not the agent guiding everything. This is the market that's going to go ahead and do that. But I'll get off my soapbox.
Tara Savage had this comment yesterday on a Facebook page. She's an experienced realtor.
Yeah, without doubt.
My concern is listing agents that are not capable of explaining the value of paying a buyer's agent to sellers.
That's exactly right.
So here's what she's saying. If you're taking a house, if you're a realtor, and you're working on behalf of a seller, and you're at the dining room table or the kitchen table with a seller, and you're putting the contract together to determine a price, and if that listing agent does not explain or convey or does not have the talent or insight or education to explain to their client, perhaps you should include a commission of this number.
And why?
And why? Or if that topic does not come up in conversation, it goes unaddressed.
It has to be addressed because the buyer-broker agreement now has these 3 or 4 different.
Or what if the seller's agent utilizes this tactic?
Well, they're required to sign a.
You work with me, we don't include compensation for the buyer's broker
Well,
and save you some money.
Well, that's now a required box to
I-
check.
right.
In the list.
Saying we
listing
will
agreement.
offer 0.
So the question becomes, okay, that's totally the seller's right to do that.
Their prerogative.
It's the listing agent's prerogative either to accept it or not, right?
Which in this tight inventory market, most will accept. In fact, all will.
But then how are you going to have the conversation about, well, nobody's showing the house because the buyer's there's no compensation. I'm going to bet you a bottle of bourbon because
Okay.
I've been tracking day over day buyer broker percentages. First and foremost, this whole lawsuit was never about commissions. Never about
It
commissions.
was about transparency.
It was about transparency, and it was really about the dismantling of NAR.
Yeah. Well,
DOJ.
is NAR going to survive this?
At one point in this show, I predicted 30% by the end of this year. I think it'd be closer to 60.
Drop in membership at NAR.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look,
Why join NAR anymore?
well, I see.
I'll take it a step further.
I come at this from a very different
What
perspective.
are the future of any associations?
Well, we've been talking about that for a long time.
I mean,
right?
this expedites it.
We've been talking about that for a long time. But let me back up for a second. I've been doing this for 35 years. I've never been more excited about real estate than I am right now. Because in order for me to sit next to a buyer or a seller, you've got to have the skills to be able to communicate, back to that word communicate, your value proposition, the market situation as it is at the moment, and what the reality of where we're going forward. You're going to have to negotiate that. Here's another prediction. I will bet you between now and July, you're going to see in the contracts, just like commercial, that they're going to actually have to put in what the buyer's agent's getting paid and what the selling agent's going to get paid, which will only complete the transparency, right? It's there. It's transparent. It's what everybody is getting paid. The other thing is, I'll bet you listing agents are going to say, look, I want to see a buyer-broker agreement. That's going to happen.
Comments coming in. Fast and Furious.
I had a lot of coffee this morning.
We'll go to a guy who I have tremendous respect for in Deep Throat. Really interesting to hear Keith's insider real-world take on this big story. I will say that I have gotten tremendous value out of buyers, brokers in my life of real estate transactions. I've gotten very little value out of sellers, brokers.
Yeah.
I know what I'm selling. I'm at a C buying in a new area that I don't know well. I would be much more likely to do a for sale by own or a FSBO and have done it once than try to buy without a broker, particularly in a new geographical territory. I'm happy to pay for the buyer's broker.
And that's
I've done a FSBO.
Thank you, Deep Throat. So that's why I'm kind of saying this is really more of a listing agent struggle on that end of it, right? Because the path is a little bit simpler. Also, Deep Throat's a seasoned seller, right? He knows the market. He knows what's required to go ahead and buy and sell. But look, there's one thing I know for sure: buying and selling is not getting easier, and you need real estate professionals. Look, again, I'm probably going to get myself in all kinds of trouble, but I'm prepared. It is what it is at this point. You know why I'm so excited about this? Guess what the bar just did?
I'd say this is what happened. You took,
The bar just went.
well, I think you pretty much took a boatload of realtors out of the business. And the ones that are experienced and savvy are going to adapt and pivot and figure this out. And they're going to have less competition, which means they can gain more market share because the business has become more difficult. And as the business has become more difficult, the ones that survive and know how to adapt are the ones that are going to get more business.
So
Is that fair?
yeah, that's fair. And the back to the point to thinking that this is about the 6%. It never was. Jude, if you don't mind putting slide number 1 up for me, please. I emailed it to you. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
he emailed them to you.
I apologize. I should have told you that. Well, I'll let him find them while I.
I'm not seeing them.
Oh, okay. Maybe I didn't email
Maybe
them.
you emailed them to me.
I thought I put Judah in there, but we will double check that. So, since
He sent them to Justin.
I sent them to the wrong, which you, okay, I'll forward them.
Justin at Chip Engineering's got your slides over there,
There you go.
along with me.
It's funny.
I'll send them to Judah. Here they come to you, Judah.
I've got a meeting with them.
Mr. Justin, Justin at Chip Engineering. That's cool.
Yeah,
He's appreciating the slides right now.
he's appreciating the slides.
Judah,
And
they're now in your inbox.
I have a standing meeting with him at 12:30. That's why. Thank you. So when Judah gets that to pull it up, we're looking at year-over-year buyer broker compensation offered in the car footprint from 2019 to current year-to-date 2004. And you'll see the high point was in 2021, where it was 2.9%. So we were just shy of 3%. We're now currently at 2.86%. My point is we've averaged out. We've never really ever averaged out at 6% across the board. There has been a downward pressure on commission percentages for quite some time. It will continue. But what's going up since then?
Prices. So even though commissions have gone down, the transactions, the amounts have gone up. So basically you're saying six of one and half a dozen of the other.
And
that's what you're saying, right?
And this is when, I've been saying this is when the pros show up. The pros are going to show up.
I got some very tough questions for you coming up.
Sure.
No, keep going.
This is when the pros show up. I got to go.
I got some very tough questions coming up for you.
Yeah, good. Well, from you or from the feed?
From me.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So this is when the pros show up, right? I used this analogy the other day. Those of us that focused on clients and relationships will do well. Those of us that focused on transactions and customers probably are not going to see the other side of this.
I will get to the questions on the feed. I want to make sure I get mine out first. National Association of Realtors, one of the most powerful lobbying groups in America.
Is it any longer?
What is its future? Here's a more direct question. Will Keith and Jonas Smith and Yes Realty Partners be members of National Association of Realtors?
I've got until October or November to make that decision, right? Look, you and I have been talking about this privately, publicly for a very long time. I've learned one thing in my 60-something years on this earth. Sometimes it's best just to sit back and watch, right? And
this is the non-answer here.
No, it's just the true answer. Sit back and watch. There's a bunch of things that just been ticked off that we've been talking about for a long time, right? There's a settlement now on the table. It hasn't quite been done yet. It'll be done somewhere between now and July, right? The Keller Williams settled, right? The next big thing is, what's going to happen with the local MLS? Is my prediction that a regional MLS is going to kind of swallow us up that I've been predicting since 2000?
We're talking Bright.
2022.
We're talking Bright.
That's exactly right. Is that going to happen? By the way, Bright has to also opt into this because it includes MLSs, right? But I think they got the capital to do something.
I think so.
They'll do fine.
I think so.
They'll do fine. But this is what's going to happen. I think you're going to see these larger regional MLSs. I think you're going to see, this is probably in the next 12 to 24 months, local and national associations focus more on training and education and professional development. Thank you. Professional development. I think that's where the value proposition is for these organizations to be part of. But it's slowly moving to the point that you could be a member of Bright right now and not be a member of NAR, and not be a member of CAR, and still conduct business. That's because we got a data share agreement. If that data share agreement goes away, then that option comes off the table.
Multiple people are asking, including
Moi.
some of your colleagues,
Oh boy.
what is going to happen with the local association?
Yeah, I think I just said it. I think it's going to turn. We've been predicting this forever.
Donna Patton watching the program.
Yeah,
She's
we've
giving
been-
props to your top-rate tech powers
Thank you. It's not predicting.
in relation to the email you sent to Justin Schimpf there.
Yeah, she knows.
What's going to happen to Carr?
She knows that all too well. Yeah, I think. Well, look, NAR's going to lose. I put this on the table back in 2022. What is the value proposition, and what are we going to do when the inevitable happens? Well, guess what? The inevitable just happened, right? So, what is the association going to do? It will lose members. It will lose revenue, right? So, how can it reinvent itself to go ahead and that's a decision they need to make, right? Right now, the MLS is their 10-ton elephant. It's their revenue generating machine, right? Plus the dues on that end of it. But it's really the MLS that generates revenue. If that goes away, then what's next, coach? And that's a decision current board members need to make, future board members need to make. I can assure you I won't be one of them. And because, this path is it's on it. It's going down. This train is not going to get stopped. But how it impacts the local buyer and seller, I think it will impact very little. I think the sellers will probably still include a buyer broker compensation because they want to sell. The buyers.
You think that?
I do, actually, yeah. Matter of fact, I'm tracking it. I got another slide. I'm tracking it day by day, and I'll tell you every week if it's starting to go down. Right now, we're still at 3% and 2.5%. I don't see that changing because of what I said earlier. Okay, you offer zero. I'm competing. Jerry, guess what pendulum is going to start swinging soon?
You're saying we're going to go from a seller's market to a buyer's market?
It's going to take a time, but that pendulum is starting to slightly move, and you know why?
I don't know if I necessarily agree with you on this.
No, it's in certain market prices in
Yeah.
certain locations that pendulum is moving a little bit. Some of them are pegged back over that way, but eventually, I know this much: what goes up always comes down. That buyer, that seller pendulum is eventually going to start swinging closer to the center.
Donna Patton watching the program. Donna Patton is a pros pro.
Donna,
I wish you were here to talk about this with us.
Yeah.
A pros pro, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
She says, if the National Association of Realtors goes away, so does the Code of Ethics.
I think it just went away anyway.
All of your designations with their education goes away as well.
Yeah.
We are left with license law, which is a very low bar.
Without a doubt. But Donna, and I love you with all my heart and soul, but I'm not so sure ethics was really being enforced, I come from a very different opinion on that. I tell you what this will happen, what this thing will start propagating, which we don't do. You know what it's going to start propagating? Dual agency.
I think
a lot of dual agency.
I think dual agency has already been very present.
No, but not nowhere near in the numbers. Very minuscule.
Dual agency, I'll put it in a nutshell, is when one realtor is representing both the buyer and seller.
And what can't they do by state law?
Dual agency is a very slippery slope.
Amen.
For the individual that's
the buyer and the seller.
Representing both the buyer and the seller.
No, it's slippery for the buyer and the seller.
And for the agent.
Well, correct, because they don't get full representation on either side.
Right.
So if you and Judah,
we see a lot of dual agency internally within similar offices.
So, well, that's designated agency.
Yeah.
That's not dual agency. That's two very different things.
Very fine line there.
But
fine line.
From a licensing perspective, it's not a fine line. It's two very different things.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. I can't talk to Channel 29 right now.
Keep going.
So, you'll start seeing that happening, and I think you're also probably going to, if that ends up happening, you're going to end up seeing individual suits against individual agents propagating big time.
This question's come in from one of your colleagues asking for some anonymity.
Yeah, please.
Does Keith think the buyer broker is going to have conversations about flat compensation or retainer compensation?
So, full stop, end of story. It's always been on the table. Been on the table forever. It will never, that option has always been there. Now, is the
How often is that happening?
very rarely, it has very low impact on the market, but there are business.
John Blair, hello.
There are business models, the agents out there, and that'll work if they want to do that. But you got to take a deep dive into what that representation actually means and the lack thereof of the representation.
Todd Rath watching the program.
Hey, Todd, how you doing?
Real estate investor.
Hey, Todd.
I have always thought good realtors do provide info and advice and tools. But I've always thought that a flat 6%, no matter the price model, is absolutely broken.
Oh, without a doubt, but it's never, so Todd, so that you know, going
We
back.
know that it was never the case here, but the average consumer did not know
Believes
that.
so
The
that
average consumer thought that it was
that's
6%
the problem
no matter
here.
what.
That's-
Folks like Todd or me or Deep Throat
That's-
realized that was not the case.
That's exactly right.
But everyone else thought that
and
was the
that's
case.
the and that is my
And that clandestine nature of it was done purposely.
well, that I don't know because I wasn't in the room, but I tell you, NAR should have been in front of this long before this happened, right? You know, but the general and there are back to my comment about where the bar just went. We all know the bar entry is kind of low. The bar to do this business now just went in the stratosphere because you're going to have to actually communicate with a client now, like us professionals that do, and say, okay, this is what I do. This is how I do it. This is my fee. Does that work or it doesn't work? If it doesn't work, Mr. Buyer, that's not a problem.
That's going to be the key, is how many in a tight inventory market, what's the percentage we're down versus peak COVID?
Oh, it's right.
Sales down? Sales volume?
Oh, 12%. We were
more than
peak
that.
COVID you're talking about?
Way more than that.
No. Are you talking, I don't have that
Go
slide.
year over year, what are we down?
Yeah, but I'm on percentages. I don't
Okay.
have volume here.
We're way down. Inventory
Yeah.
so extremely down.
Prices up, inventory's down.
The agent that says, this is my commission, this is what I charge, and if someone balks and says, I'm not going to pay that, I think what's going to happen is many are going to be desperate and they're going to say, all right, I'll do it your way, and then that's when that becomes the price.
But they're only going to be able to do that for so long because they're not going to be able to stay in business, right? And that's the other thing. Most people don't realize real estate agents are independent contractors, independent businesses. You know, those of us who know how to run a business will do very well. Those who do not. So if you don't have enough working capital to stretch past this little bit of this hiccup that's coming up, this is going to impact you, right? You know, but at the end of the day, there will be agents that do that. And you know what? I'll get the 2 phone calls I got this weekend who was working with another agent that did that and said, Keith, can you come help us? This thing is going sideways. And then my answer was, sorry, can't help you. You're under a buyer-broker agreement. Good luck.
This is from Carly Wagner, a realtor and engineer. Come July, that won't be a metric we'll be able to track.
That's
The
100%
MLS will not be allowed to even contain a field for buyer agent commission, assuming the settlement is enacted as currently written.
And it will. So Carly, what I'm doing is I'm tracking day over day up into that date to see where the buyer-broker commission lands the day before this happens. So I'll be sharing that with everybody. That's slide number 2, Judah, on that. I've been tracking it since 15th of March in the full car, in the full car footprint on, so I'm going to do this every week and share it on Fridays with everybody and say, okay, where did the last week's buyer
He's
broker
blowing up here.
compensation?
How does this, Deep Throat, I'll get to your comments here. This is from one of your colleagues. God, you got realtors watching you right now here. How does this impact the discount brokers who are already doing a discount model?
It's not. You know, what they'll have to do.
Who are some of the discount brokers?
Yeah, I really wouldn't. local,
There's a boatload of them.
yeah, local brokerages, I kind of want to stay away from naming.
Okay.
Naming.
But there are discount brokers that are national.
Yeah, and I just don't know them off the top of my head, to be
Okay.
honest with you. There's, up until this point, they've been so limited, I just can't think of it off the top of my head. I'm being honest, I just can't. But back to the Carly Wagner's comment is I will be keeping a track on this because I want to bet you a bottle of bourbon. I think we'll probably be somewhere around 2% as the norm.
2%
On the buyer broker side.
And on the list,
On the list, I don't think that's gonna. I think you're going to see between a 4 and a 5% settle out on this. You can't, if you're going to honestly do a listing, just between photography, et cetera, it's hard to do that under 2%.
this comment has come in. With the margin shrinking, expect agents to be doing more, including serving as their own photographers.
Yeah, well, that's a bad move. Always hire a pro to do a pro's job, right? Always hire a pro to do a pro's
This
job.
comment has come in from Deep Throat. Does Keith have a theory about why Berkshire did not join the settlement?
Yeah, not a theory. I've actually read their writings on it. They believe they can win. They also have the most to lose because Berkshire, Deep Throat, is the only one that has the cash to actually pay the 0.25%. They are the only of the 100 brokerages plus that have been excluded from this. They're the only one that has the actual cash to pay. They're gonna go all the way to the mat on this one, or settle, or end up with a negotiated settlement.
Carly Wagner respectfully disagrees with Donna. She says, I respectfully disagree that the National Association of Realtors going away means ethics are gone. Other industries do not operate as such. There will still be DPOR and all the legal requirements for brokers and agents. DPOR and the state real estate board is the actual authority when it comes to client grievances with agents, brokers. NAR was only the rules of the road agent disputes for the most part. Further, the code of ethics for most other industries is not enforced through a mandatory paid membership. That's a great comment there.
So
in engineering, for example, our licenses are also through DPOR.
Sure.
For engineering, there's a far more professional liability, and
Sure.
DPOR requires you to agree to a code of ethics for licensing. There are a slew of elective associations such as American Society of Civil Engineers. They too have codes of ethics, but employment and access to resources engineers need to do their jobs are not held hostage by any of these associations. Membership in these associations are far lower than in NAR, and is not the reason why engineers are generally considered by most of the population as one of the most ethical professions.
So let me paint that picture a different way. And again, my love for Donna, and I get it. But this is going to be a pure numbers game at this point. Because what's going to happen, and we've been predicting at 30%, some reports that you read say 60%, but there's going to be somewhere between 30 and 60% of folks leaving NAR or CAR. The question is, how many of those are leaving the industry, right? So let me back up for a second. So right now in the state of Virginia, I do not need to belong to an association, right? I have to have a license to conduct real estate.
You see this with a lot of commercial guys. Explain this.
Yeah, so you just hit the nail on the head. This is going to migrate somewhat to a commercial model, which, by the way, in all commercial contracts have who's getting paid and how they're getting paid.
It's very clear.
It's very clear. And oh, by the way, I've done enough commercial deals in my life that the very first thing you start negotiating is how you get paid.
Before pretty much anything else.
That's the first thing that happens is, okay, we're going to sit down and talk about this. Does your seller offer buyer broker?
To the point where both sides in a commercial deal are so akin or so used to having that discussion, it's pretty fluid.
It's very fluid, very open, very transparent.
Yeah.
Everybody knows exactly what they're doing and who they're doing it with and so forth and so on. The real question, I think, is on the ethics question. So if we got a pool of 100, just to pick a number, of active agents and only 25 of them or 40 of them are part of NAR and the ethics, What about the rest of them? So to Carly's point, I think you're also going to see, as this migrates longer, things happening at the state level to start implementing this stuff. Don't know that for a fact, but I can see it start more tracking towards.
And to Carly's point, and I think it's a good point, you're paying to be
Oh
a
boy,
part
I got
of,
Donna texting me. I'm
to
in trouble.
Carly's point, you are paying to be a part of the organization. How much can an organization hold you accountable if you are paying them for membership and they rely on your dues to stay afloat? That's what you say. You're paying NAR to be a part of NAR. How much are they going to hold you accountable when they need your money to stay afloat?
Yeah,
especially now.
It's going to be what it's going to be, right? The industry is, look.
This is very good for the industry.
Oh, absolutely.
This is very good for the consumer. Who this is going to potentially hurt is the first-time home buyer.
I disagree with that.
The first time, here, I'll throw this out there.
I'll tell you,
professional.
I'll give you
Keep
my
going.
reasoning why.
God, we have a lot of comments here.
I've been told to be careful about talking about percentages.
Talking about percentages?
Yeah,
How so?
we'll see. We'll find out after the show.
Okay. So we're going to talk about.
We're going to talk about percentages.
Okay. Okay. So I can ask you a question about percentages.
Yeah, I'll
What are you
listen
gonna
to
call
the
them, widgets?
I'm going to listen to the question and then artfully respond to it. So
The first-time home buyer. If the first-time home buyer needs to, or is in a situation where they're looking at a house and their representation is not offered any kind of commission by the seller of said house.
Well, let's do me a favor and keep me out of jail, and we'll call them eggs for the rest of the.
The first-time home buyer, then in an expensive market and a high interest rate in market, when their representative says, look, I'm not offered any eggs by the seller in this deal. If you want to buy this house, you're going to have to come up for the down payment, the closing costs, and then you're going to have to come up with some extra eggs for me. And by the way, you're not going to be able to infuse those eggs over a 30-year mortgage vehicle.
I think we can call them commissions. We just can't talk about a specific number. Okay?
Okay.
So let's call them commissions.
Okay.
We just won't talk about a specific number. Because this thing isn't settled yet, and I might get my license pulled here by the end of this show. So the question is, how does the first-time home buyer,
If the first-time home buyer has to pay their representation as opposed to doing it through a 30-year vehicle where they're financing that
we
commission?
brought this up before. What was my answer before on that?
It's a long time ago.
Got it. So what you're going to see is the regulators a couple things happen. The regulators on the federal sides will say, okay, you can now include seller as a seller concession, the buyer broker compensation. That's what's going to happen. Somewhere between now and the end of this. I've got Bill Tucker coming on.
Bill Tucker's big time.
And another, and Katie West to talk about this.
Also big time.
To talk about, on the 29th, to talk about this from a real estate attorney and a closing perspective. Got other couple of real estate attorneys that we're talking with on getting on to talk about how this actually works, how this is actually going to work. By a raise of hands, anybody ever done a FSBO here before?
Yeah.
Where
many of them.
Yeah, where the buyer broker.
Just did one in January.
Where you were paying a buyer broker fee. Have you done that one?
No.
You're on the buy side.
No, in January I sold. And the people buying did not have representation. There was no representation in anything at all.
But on the buyer broker side, if you're doing a FSBO and you're doing that and you're rolling the compensation into the sale, it just moves along. Because guess what? That compensation ends up on the seller side of the ledger, not on the buyer's side of the ledger. Everything just moves along and we're fine. That's why I'm saying this is why communication. This is all about communication. Me communicating. So let's talk about this first-time home buyer. What price point are they going to buy?
In this market, probably high threes and
Forget about the
fours.
fact that you can't even find it.
High threes, fours, early fives.
Right. So that
Depending on where you're shopping, what the county you're shopping in.
So that seller If he puts or she puts 0 in there, and it's requirement of, and the person that is buying that is the first-time home buyer, and they put 0 compensation in there, Jerry, you're trying to sell your home and move up the income ladder. Well, hang on a second. Let me get this out.
You're basically saying you're going to
Getting
take out a
to get it
huge
out.
amount of the buyer pool because the people that can
Well,
afford
there is no buyer pool.
the people that can afford that price point aren't going to have any additional money to also.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I don't buy that.
And why don't you buy that? So how are you going to sell your house?
Well, you got investors.
That's not the biggest pool of it.
You
Joe.
got. I mean, there are investors.
There are investors, but so you're telling me of the 3,000 of all the
That's
sales.
one option.
It's an option, but it's not the bulk of it. We were talking specifically about
First-time home buyers.
First-time home buyer. So if the seller is trying to sell their home and move up the ladder, right, or laterally move or move out of the area, right? We're going to today. What are the six D's of the real estate right now? Diamonds, diapers, divorce, downsizing, and death. That's the real estate market. People are buying and selling because either one of those or a combination
That's
of
the
those.
first time I've heard you use that.
Yeah,
What are the 6 Ds?
You never heard this before?
No. Diamonds,
Diamonds. I'm getting.
divorce,
No. Diapers,
diamonds, diapers, divorce,
Downsizing.
downsizing, death.
and death. That's why people are buying and selling right now. They're either getting married and putting new household togethers, they're having babies and need a new house or a bigger house. Unfortunately, the divorce rate, I can't tell you how many divorce listings we're doing right now. I can't tell you why, but that's huge at the moment. Downsizing, Keith and Yona are downsizing because I'm not, but I can't have the big house. Or they're downsizing. I have listings stacked up of people that can't stay in their house any longer for health reasons. So that's a downsizing. And then the final one is death. Right, but that's it. Though that is the real estate market.
I
right
think
now.
you guys would just one man's opinion. There's a
You've never
boatload
heard
of
that
comments here.
the sixth time?
No, that's the first time you've used it on the show. I think folks in general would be crazy not to think that we're going to see sellers saying we're not offering compensation.
I can guarantee. I will bet you a bottle of bourbon that's not going to happen. There'll be some,
I think there's going to be some.
but
That's
some.
all I'm saying.
Some is some.
And somehow, and how those
I
are
can
managed.
tell you, as of Friday, when this hit the thing, none have happened.
Well, it was just hit the thing.
I know that, but people put houses on the
Yeah,
market.
it just hit the
But
thing.
I'm going to track it, and maybe you're right, but I think the majority are going to land somewhere between 2% and 3% on the buyer broker. That's what's going to happen. Back to the first-time home buyer, right? Factor out investors, right? Let's factor that out for a second. If you have a seller that's trying to move up the ladder, that needs to sell their house, to go ahead and take their $300,000 of equity out and buy, and I got a buyer coming in that can't pay the compensation that is agreed to in a buyer-broker agreement on that end of it, that seller they're going to either increase the price, and that's going to come back to the professionalism, right? When we're sitting at your kitchen table and going, okay, I understand what you're doing. I understand how you want to move forward. This is the path forward for you to move. You're going to have to include something. If you don't want to, we can try it, but the market's going to tell us very quickly, right, if we're right or we're wrong.
Todd Rath watching the program, he says, I envision selling realtors becoming consultants and one-stop shops.
No.
Fix-up guys, photo, staging, listing for set fees and not percentages.
We'll find out. That's contradictory to what Deep Throat was saying, though, right? He was thinking more along the
No,
lines.
Deep Throat said he didn't see value in the seller. He saw value in the buyer.
So I want to clarify this, right?
But that was Todd Rath's comment.
No. Let me clarify language because the words matter here. So technically, a seller's agent is a buyer's agent. So you understand that?
This is what he said.
No. Let me.
Okay.
But it's industry. If you take a look at it, a selling agent is a buyer's agent. A listing agent is a listing agent. It is totally confusing. I agree 100%. But if you take a look at at the listings and so forth and so on, they define a buyer's agent as a seller's agent, and they define a listing agent as a listing agent.
Okay, and this, in Deep Throat's commentary and the viewers and listeners' commentary, they're not looking at it that way.
I understand that, yeah.
Yeah, he says,
For the agents watching it, I wanted to make sure that that's what we were talking about, because agents think sellers as buyer's agents.
yeah, he's saying that he's gotten tremendous value out of buyer's brokers.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
That he's gotten very little buyer out of sellers brokers.
I mean, just have
And he does FSBOs. Then this, Todd says, well, you heard what Todd said. Carly,
but I wasn't sure if Todd was talking on the listing side or the buy side.
he's talking about people that sell houses. He's
Got it.
talking about listing agents.
Listing agent. Got
He's
it.
saying he sees listing agents becoming consultants and one-stop shops. Fix-up guys, photo staging, everything. I could see that for a set fee, where the listing agent becomes more of an advertising agency.
So what is easier?
You see what I mean?
Look, the market's going to tell us all this, right? We're just crystal balling it right now. I'm confident that the buyer broker agent is not going to go away. There'll be far less of us, more professional, being able to communicate and being transparent with both sides. But back to the communication skill, right? This is going to require me as a buyer's agent to communicate with the listing agent. And if the listing agent doesn't communicate with me, then I got to have a conversation with my buyer's agent and go, okay, as of August 1, or whatever the last day of this is, our buyer broker agreement now says you're paying me 2 eggs, right? I can't reach the listing agent on this. I don't know if there's any buyer broker compensation in it. This is our options. What would you like to do? Understand, our agreement says this, so if we go in there and negotiate and do this, and the seller isn't paying for the buyer broker agreement, we've already agreed to this. Those are very hard conversations, Jerry, to have. And it always amazes me how real estate agents that talk about contracts and numbers have a hard time having conversations with people on how they get paid and what they do. This has always amazed me.
This was a thread on Matt Neese's page. You saw the post?
I did.
About,
If you read a little bit further down, he kind of reverses what he talked about.
I thought the initial post was,
Look at me.
yes.
Yeah. Well, good for him.
Where he's talking about how many investment properties
Good
he
for him.
owns.
Good for him.
But then where I was most intrigued by this thread was the interaction by Michael
Good for
Plecker.
Matt. Good for Matt.
Michael Plecker and Michael Guthrie. You
Yeah,
read
I saw
that?
I did, yeah. Mhm.
Okay. And they went back and forth.
I saw that.
Michael Guthrie says, I think there's going to be a great deal of pushback from buyers who will need to pay your commission if the seller does not co-op.
So to say that this is going to be uncomfortable for a period of time would not be accurate. But eventually it's going to settle out. And, you know, buying a home is a difficult, just think about, I just did a showing the other day. Wife doesn't want it, husband wants it. How do you navigate that, coach? Right? So it takes...
Depends on the dynamic of the husband and wife.
Well, it depends on the skills of the agent.
I think that's going to go to a husband and wife dynamic, but go ahead.
Well, it's a husband and wife dynamic, but ultimately my goal is try to get them someplace that they want to be, right? So I have to understand both sides. So there is a ratcheted up level of master's degree negotiation skills that you're going to need to be successful in this business. And that's it. Those who know how to negotiate their own commission, negotiate for their client, negotiate with the other side, if those who have got that skill level will do very well.
This is coming from one of your colleagues. I agree with what Jerry said
I'm
about
in trouble?
you got a lot of folks watching here.
Sure.
About the out-of-pocket marketing costs, especially at the lower price points, being a cause for concern for some of us.
100%. But
Explain what she said there.
so if we're
She said
doing...
specifically at the lower price points.
Got it. So this is a bit of an academic conversation because the lower price point doesn't really exist, right? So we have to.
If you're talking,
we have to define.
If you're talking a $500,000 deal.
But is that the lower point, price point?
Okay, let's say the lowest price point in this area is probably what, 400,000?
Is that the lowest point? Back to the point, is that what the first-time home buyer is buying?
I think let's call it 400,000 for a first-time home buyer. That's really light. Actually, where are you going to find let's call it 400,000.
So Jerry, you're having two different conversations here.
Yeah.
You're having a conversation on what's available and what is considered entry level. Now, you're not supposed to exceed over 33% of your income.
Which we know that's not.
Everybody goes to 50%.
Of course.
Right, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Let's call it 400,000. If a buyer's at two eggs, I'm going eggs because you're my boy here. If a buyer's at two eggs at 400K, you're talking what, 8K?
I just got my license.
You got 8K right there. A percentage of that is going to the brokerage.
Correct.
A great chunk of that's going to taxes.
Correct.
If marketing materials and photography are X amount of dollars,
correct.
That leaves
eggs.
That leaves very little yolk.
Ooh, I like that.
Played. That leaves a couple of eggshell cracks and a little bit of yolk. That's what your colleague's saying here.
And those of us who don't know how to do an ROI or run a spreadsheet or run a profit and loss on it, on what your cost is on that, will eventually do a bunch of transactions and give stuff away.
And pass on those.
No, they'll first give them away and then realize they're losing money.
Because they don't get the relationship for the move-up experience?
No, they don't realize they're losing money because they don't understand the numbers as you outlined. And those of us that run a business like a business will say, no, I'm sorry, I only can do this for two eggs, and we're picking eggs. It doesn't really matter on that end of it. And
I'm not even sure it works at two eggs at that number.
But that's the point I'm trying to make. This impacts, everybody's thinking this is the buyer side. This impacts the selling side, the listing agent very much so, because your listing presentation now has to kind of be off the charts and go, okay, for two eggs, this is what you get. And this is how we do it. On the buyer side, it's the same thing, right? There's been listing presentations around forever. There's never really been quote unquote buyer presentations. Now you're going to have to do that. I'm going to have to say, okay, this is what I do and this is how I get paid, right? And either you're going to accept it or you're not.
Travis Hackworth in Danville.
Hang on one second.
Yeah.
Travis, you're outstanding, man, and thank you for sending me. He's texting me directly all the awesome stuff that he's doing, that they're doing out there in Danville. I just want to say thank you for doing that.
Travis Hackworth watching the program right now. He says, those with a strong marketing background and base will do well now. The ability to successfully sell yourself will be key. They're going to have to know their worth now more than ever.
There you go. That's it. You've got to be able to know. And all of this conversation we're having, there was a point there prior to the settlement that I wasn't really sure that we were going to, that 30% or more agents were going to, now I'm confident you're going to start seeing that by the end of this year. So the level of people around will be a little bit more professional. The pool of sales and buyers are going to stay the same, right? Eggs might change a little bit, plus or minus, but eggs were always negotiable. This is no revolution or revelation out there. This is no thing. It was never communicated that way, right? The professionals communicated it that way, right? And said, this is what I do and this is how I get paid.
Savvy buyers knew. Layman buyers and sellers did not.
They did not. And the fact that I think I'm a little burned by this, that there were some, in my opinion, unprofessional folks in this industry that kind of forced this to happen. Oh, by the way, so that you know, there is a buyer lawsuits going out there. This only settles the seller side. They haven't made it up to class action suit level yet, and they probably won't. But it's 11:15.
I can keep going.
Okay.
I mean, there's a full load of.
Well, we want to save stuff for Friday.
Yeah. What's your plan? Do you want to get to some of these comments?
Yeah, sure. Whatever you want to do.
Todd Raff, the true value in a tough, tight market for a buying realtor is knowing of non-listed properties, pocket listings, possibilities. I had this conversation with my wife this morning.
Yeah.
The pocket listing and knowing the inside and outs of certain neighborhoods.
So we don't want to use the word pocket league because that's actually illegal. So,
Well, I can use that.
well,
I can use that.
well, it's at the state level. The knowing. So let me try it a different way. The value is knowing your region, knowing your micro markets,
Yeah.
knowing what's going on and what's happening. By the way, that's always been the criteria. What happened in these freaking unicorn years is, this cup of coffee could have did
The
a
deals
deal.
that trade like at a club or over on a walking
But
path,
that's not.
on the golf course.
That is not the majority. That's maybe the upper end stuff, but that's not the majority of the sales, and I don't think it will be. But that's always been the job of a real estate professional. I'm not even going to call him a realtor anymore. A real estate professional is to be a freaking professional and know what's going on in your marketplace. And those who know that will do very well.
Carly's really bringing the fire here.
I'm not surprised.
I'm going to be blunt. Well, I mean, she's also an engineer, so if you can bring the fire when you make your living. Make your living as an engineer.
I work with engineers. I'm seeing 2 here in about an hour.
She says to be blunt and transparent. I see ethics and rules violations by local agents all the time.
Sure.
I report them to CAR all the time, and it's all handled internally between the association and the violating agent broker. Consumer clients are not advised, nor do they have access to the agent broker's violation history. I've been an advocate to have the violation history be public knowledge, but the truth is no association wants this to be public because the truth is they are there to protect their agents ahead of clients.
So back on the ethics thing, what's going to happen is
It's from Carly.
the industry, the professional agents that are left over, they're going to police themselves. That's what's going to happen. But I can't disagree with Carly at all. I've recently have done a bunch of transactions where I felt lines were crossed. I've asked the buyer and the seller if they'd be willing to make a formal complaint, and they all said no. So without the buyer and the seller, the actual client, not customer, client, I use that word very specifically, willing to step up and file, it doesn't generally have a lot of legs.
This question's come in. How will this impact Zillow?
Zillow's also a broker, so it's one of these brokerages that are part of this 100-something. They're going to have to mediate and figure something out. Look, Zillow Homes, which is outperforming Zillow, by the way, hugely, Realtor, are just portals. You know what that means?
Tell us.
All they're doing is they're marketing portals to show homes that are available. That's all they are. They're not portals by which you can do a transaction on.
The follow-up to that question is, so many realtors are paying for leads through Zillow. This is going to diminish the value of those leads.
I've never been a favor personally.
Do you agree with that?
We've never bought a lead in our life and never will. Our business is built upon referrals and
Do you think it's going to diminish the value of those leads?
I'll be honest.
The value proposition of paying for leads.
I don't know. Don't really. Like I just said, I don't put any thought to it because our business is purely relational. Our business model is exactly what you and I are doing right now. It's relational. It's referrals. Never bought a lead, never will buy a lead. So those who do, if that works for them, God bless them. Good for
Todd
them.
says he thinks that this is going to eliminate the shady and underhanded folks in the industry.
We needed a cleaning of house for a very long time. This is going to do that. It's going to be painful probably for the next 12 to 18 months because it's going to take about that long for things to cycle out. But when we get to and I'm just going to say this and say it out loud. When this gets to the other side, our industry is going to be far better off. The clients are going to be far better off. The sellers are going to be far better off. And the buyers are going to be far better off. But we're going to be, we're not going to be 1.6. We're down to 1.1 million now. If we're at 400 to 500,000 agents by this time next year in NAR, I would be surprised. Maybe wrong, but we shall see.
Let them know, Bill Tucker, Katie West.
Yeah, so it's on the 29th. We're going to pick up, that's next Friday.
That's a big time show.
We're going to, yeah, because I want to have a nuts and bolts conversation about, okay, this just happened, right? We're decoupled, right? What does that look like in the actual real estate transaction perspective? What does that look like? How do we do that? And my suspicion is, because I've already had this conversation, my suspicion is you're going to hear, well, it's not going to be much different than a FSBO, assuming it's the seller's is offering 0 eggs, right? It's going to be function just like a FSBO goes, which means I've, as the buyer's agent, got to negotiate this. And it's going to look a lot like commercial transactions where the contracts are going to start writing it. And the question now is for the agents out there, are you going to start writing in contracts what you're going to get paid?
You have to.
No, you don't. No,
Well, you should.
Not at the moment, not until July you don't have to.
Yeah.
But, and that's the question I'm going to ask Bill. Okay, after July, how do I guaranteed to get paid? Forget about relationship. This is a business decision. Okay, I've got an agreement with you, right? How do I guarantee to get paid? How do I guarantee the seller's actually going to pay me or pay the brokerage? How's that going to work, Coach? The only way that's going to work is got to be in the deal.
Keith Smith,
Hey.
fantastic show.
Yeah. Ooh, 11:22.
Fantastic
Sorry.
show. Friday, we'll continue the conversation. We didn't get to a boatload of comments. I'll try to save some of them.
So those are watching and listening. You know, particularly up my fellow real estate professionals. Just send questions in anonymously if you don't want your name on it and get into trouble, apparently, like I'm doing at the moment.
You're not in trouble.
I'm not so sure about that, but it's okay. You know, I can't get into trouble for speaking the truth.
Right. And this whole thing is about transparency and communication.
Can't get in trouble. Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
That's the two.
So if you're muzzling somebody, then it's not transparency and communication.
If you can't be transparent and you can't communicate with the other sides or the parties that are involved in it, I think that's what got us where we're at now.
There it is. Perfect way to close. Well done, Keith Smith. That was fantastic.
Yeah, so
Fantastic.
Thank you. So Ravenna,
That's his granddaughter.
has now learned this new thing that she does boom.
That was your boom right there.
That was my boom.
Judah Wickhauer, Keith Smith, Jerry Miller, online at realtalkwithkeithsmith.com. Click the partners tabs for the best of the best in real estate, realtalkwithkeithsmith.com. This show was fire. Keith Smith, bringing the ammunition.
And I'm going to ex Judah after the show, and if it's okay with you, that maybe we can start posting the week over weeks
Oh, yeah.
on the website.
Week over week, let's post them on the website. Thank you kindly for joining us. I Love Seville Show, 1 hour and 6 minutes away. No, that would be tough on Judah right there. So long, everybody. Thank you kindly for joining us. Well done.
Thank you.